Okay, what is next on the agenda? Now that we've met the next cohort of urban innovation champions, let's ask how the real estate sector is responding to the new era of sustainability. From sustainable finance to collaborative partnerships to new methods of spatial design. Let's find out more. Hosting our panel on developing a sustainable future, please welcome back to the stage Kok Chin Tai, Chairman of Smart Cities Network, who will be moderating the following panel with our esteemed guests. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much for staying on here, and I hope this will be an interesting conversation with my esteemed panelists here, whom a few I do know. Before I ask them to introduce themselves, let me set the context of this panel discussion. The theme is about developing a sustainable future, but we like to focus in the area of buildings, right, in terms of real estate, because in the last 5 years or so, we are seeing an emergence and interest in the area of sustainable development, green finance, green buildings, and all these things that are related, including Singapore, right? We have the Tengah building and Tengah development, 40,000 residential mixed development. We have had, of course, by next year, the Punggol Digital District being ready, hopefully. So these are areas that we are going to talk about in the next 23 minutes. So I have a certain approach to how we sort of conduct this panel discussion. And I'll make it very simple so that at the end of today, at the end of this panel, you would remember that it is actually A, B, and C. An ABC approach means that we want to create awareness. What is it that people are talking about when they say sustainable development? B is about building capabilities and capacity. What does it take for us to overcome the challenges? Third, and most importantly, is commitment. So I will structure this in the next 20 plus minutes, the ABC approach, and of course, without further ado, allow me to ask our speakers to introduce themselves. And we start with the A, right? And the question to Professor Jason Pomeroy, whom I had the privilege of meeting him a few years ago. And more importantly, I saw his series of Smart City 2.0 commission. Incredible series. And if you have not seen it, I strongly recommend you to take a look at it. Because the differences in smart cities, he has articulated so well in that particular series. So I will ask Jason to briefly introduce himself and also explain about his understanding about smart cities and sustainable development, followed by Esther Ang, whom I've known for a long time, my good friend, of course, from CDL, and third, and not the least, is Kelvin Tan. All right, so I'll start with Jason, please.
Thanks very much, Kok Chin. My name's Jason Pomeroy. I'm the founding principal of Pomeroy Studio and Pomeroy Academy. We're designers and thought leaders of sustainable built environments. I wear the hat as an architect, as an academic, where I teach at Cambridge University, and also have a show on smart cities, where I kind of wax lyrical to a slightly broader audience than the lecture theatre. I guess my exploration in design has always been one which balances a creative vigour with an academic rigour. I do believe that gone are the days that we can sit as architects brandishing a black pen, doing a pretty picture and saying, this is good because I say it is. I think we need to become far more objective in our design assertions to ensure that we can be creating more sustainable built environments. And ultimately that is driven through more of a computational objective approach that uses science as the means to qualify how green a project is. Curiously enough, you mentioned smart cities. I would say that it's becoming a hackneyed term, just like sustainability has become a hackneyed term. I think a smart city is a resilient city. It's a city that appeals to the 6-year-old child all the way through to the 70-year-old grandparent. It isn't technology for technology's sake. It is about citizen co-creation. It is about ensuring that we can minimize our energy and water consumption. It is far broader than the tech. So if I was to categorize into 3, the first generation smart city was all about the tech. It was all about big finance. It was all about the economy. But the second generation smart city, like what you see in Bandung, is very much about citizen co-creation, culture. And by the time you get to the third generation smart city, like Amsterdam, like Barcelona, it is also about an environmental awareness born out of the Paris Agreements, COP26. It's looking at how to utilize space more efficiently and effectively for the common good of mankind as well as the built environment.
Thank you, thank you. And if you have not seen the video on Bandung, it's incredible. The Governor Ridwan Kamil talks about engaging the citizens through a framework. And I think, in my opinion, when it comes to innovation, the innovative culture and environment in Indonesia is really bustling. And I could rank it among the top in this part of the world. So secondly is actually I'd like Esther to introduce herself, and increasingly we talk about the public-private partnership. So maybe you can explain to us how CDL does that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kok Chin, and thank you for having me, and good morning, everybody. And why the built environment is important in helping to build a sustainable future, because even you are not in the real estate sector, you live, work, and play in one. And how you use your buildings and your home, your office space will make a difference. In fact, study shows that people spend 90% of their time indoor. So as a developer, since 1963, we are now operating in 29 countries and regions. And we know very well that actually the built environment can move the needles towards a more sustainable and low carbon future, because we are responsible for almost 40% of the global greenhouse gas emission. So how do we design, and how do we build, and how do we manage in a low carbon and a resource efficient manner is very important. And we all have heard too much, too many, reports from IPCC, the co-red for humanities and all that. I think the science is very clear. So we are not here to debate about, whether the scientists are really scaring the world or it's not. We are talking about also the art, the economy of, going green. And I think the art is like, apart from what Jason was talking about, how do we design, and how do we collaborate, from the, between the developers and the architect and consultant at the national level, and also on a higher level, on the global level, we also have to collaborate. And we all heard about the global race to zero, and we read a lot about COP26, the climate pact, and we also have the budget less than 10 days ago that Singapore has also pledged for net zero by or around 2050. So it is very clear that net zero is connecting the world. And in fact, over the last 2 years, the silver lining, came out of COVID is really connecting people. And we all agree that the health of our planet, people, business and economy and all the spaces are all interconnected and interdependent. So I think, net zero now is really the targets that the whole world is aiming for. But now the question is not about why, it's about how. So how do we design? I'm sure Jason is going to talk about it. And we are always told that the technologies are here already, to build a net zero building. But they don't come free. They don't come cheap. So how do we really invest and put money where our mouth is as a builder, as a developer? We also need to, where Kelvin, is controlling the money, the financier and also the ESG investors that has been fast growing over the last 2 years. And I think this is something that we need need enabler apart from the mindset, the skill set, the will to design better, and also to apply technology. And the enabler is really the financing. It is very important to, we need, money talks, let's put it this way. If investors, don't believe in you, if financiers don't, screen you out, the business case, is very, very strong. So for us, we actually launched the first green bond in 2017, the first green bond by a Singapore company. And since then, we have actually amassed about 3 billion worth of green financing, loan, revolving facility, or even, very creative, linking SDG with innovation. I can share a little bit more, and that is very important to enable actions. Yeah.
Thank you, Esther. So before Kelvin comes on board, I think we all know money talks, right? They say no money, no talk. So I think this has been a sponsored event with HSBC. I'm sure many of us would be very interested to know how would we get money in terms of green finance. And with that as a basis, right, I would like to ask Kelvin to introduce himself and what he does at HSBC, and maybe share an insight. How would you actually be able to assist in green finance and new developments to be sustainable? Kelvin, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. I think Esther has said and complimented that I hold the purse string. Actually, that's not true. I think this is a collective effort that we all have to work together, in terms of doing. I think in part of your theme of awareness, I think I just wanted to start off by saying that to put things in perspective, Esther talked about carbon emissions, right? And studies have shown actually that the real estate sector, and the building construction sector actually has a significant part to play in sustainability, in particular in environment and climate change. If you look at the studies, they have shown that buildings actually emits about 1/3 of the global carbon emissions every year, right? And it actually consumes 40% of global energy. So that's significant. And if we all want to lead towards the Paris Agreement of having limiting temperatures rise not above the 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050, they have also said that, collectively, the building and industry has to actually reduce carbon emissions by 50% by 2030, which is actually not too long. It's about 8 more years, and actually working towards zero carbon emission by 2050. So in that perspective, I think if we set aside the altruistic reasons why we should do this, actually, if you look at the changing weather patterns and things like that, and the fact that the cities here in Southeast Asia actually are all coastal cities and actually very much prone to severe sea level rises and all that. I think from a real estate company's perspective, to take care of their assets and values, I think it's important that they incorporate sustainability into this. And this is where Esther talked about funding, that I think HSBC and other financial institutions can come into play, because we can talk all about the sustainable efforts and all that, but we need people to fund this, right? And we need projects to fund this. So for us, and I think if you look at the industries specifically, last year in 2021, the number of sustainable loans, sustainable linked loans and green bonds that was issued just in Asia Pacific was to the tune of $126 billion. So for sure, I think there is a collective effort for us to want to look at it. It's about understanding these projects and how we can work with the real estate investors, and the property developers to do this, right? And funding this will also enable, and to help these people basically to look at retrofitting, so that they can upgrade the current developments that they have, to actually adopt new standards. I think as we move along, I think there'll be a lot of new building standards, minimum requirements for green standards, and even also managing waste, when it comes to use of construction waste and how they, dispose of these waste. So a lot of things should be done and can be done. And from our point of view, actually, from HSBC's point of view, I think it's important that, we work with our customers, to understand their sustainable strategies and how we can be enablers to that, as that said. And we also work with regulators. So I just want to take example that, in Singapore, the BCA, we work with the Building Construction Authority, where we actually have, they have a scheme for actually building retrofitting, just for energy efficiency. And developers, real estate companies can actually tap into these sort of schemes, to upgrade current buildings. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelvin. Now, before this panel, I had a brief chat to say that trying to tackle everything within a panel discussion of 25 minutes is too short a time, and I would like to explore the possibility to maybe plan a program, right, to help innovators and people who have innovation for sustainability. And I've seen some of this presentation. I think we welcome some of this innovation in waste management, solar, to be part of the ecosystem. So I will go now to the next part, which is building capabilities and capacities. But I think I agree with Jason in our planning, right, that Singapore is different from other countries, right? We have a different development angle and different ideas. And personally, I'm involved in a new development, a few hundred million in Bangladesh and in Vietnam and in Singapore. I'm a volunteer to a new nursing home. And there are challenges to really embark on sustainable development, right? Why? Because old habits die hard. So maybe I would like for Jason, back to you, right? And in your design, how would you help to overcome that? What are the challenges and difficulties, and thereby allowing you to overcome, to plan to be sustainable? Jason, please.
I guess one of the many misconceptions about sustainable design is that it's costly design, that it's actually going to cost a lot more. And yet when you think about heritage buildings, the buildings from the past, the back to basics approach, before the days of air conditioning and artificial lighting, we were all living more sustainable lives. Many years ago, I designed the first zero carbon house in Asia, which was actually based on the kampong tradition. Natural light, natural ventilation, locally sourced materials, raised up on stilts to counteract flood risk, flexible and adaptable to expanding needs of a family that could grow and shrink. Ultimately, if we can go back to look at some of those inherent back to basics principles that are caught in the culture of the place, that's where we can succeed. And I would call it like a Darwinian theory of design evolution, the survival of the strongest design ideas. You can go around Asia, you can go around the Middle East, you can go around Europe, and you'll find in, say, London, the Victorian terrace house that has stood the test of time. You can go to the Middle East, you can find the courtyard houses. You can go to China and find the Sihoyans and the hutongs. These cultural architectural expressions are sustainable. And what we should be doing is reinterpreting those traditions to drive down energy consumption and water consumption. It doesn't mean all bells, all whistles, let's stick some solar cells, let's add some wind turbines on the roof. That's not sustainability. That is incremental cost adding. What we need to do is go back to basics, understand the culture of the place, understand the people of the place, design back to basics, and then when you've got that passive design secured and you've reduced your energy and water consumption by 50 to 75%, then you can start looking at the active technologies, the solar, the biomass, the wind turbine technology, so on and so forth, in order to offset. This will then get you to perhaps a zero carbon position, but I would say that that doesn't go far enough. If I look at the IPCC data, I think we should be going to carbon negative. That's why we're designing districts, be that in Sweden or Philippines, where we are actually generating more energy than the community consumes. And that will then provide a bit more resilience to the community should there be another cataclysmic event that's on the doorstep.
Thank you, Jason. And it's a fact, right? Trying to incorporate sustainable design with sensor network, with, for the built environment, we talk about building information modeling and what BCA is trying to promote, the common data environment, You need people to spend more time to build it. So maybe, right, with all these additional costs, I'd like to ask Esther, how did CDL do it? You know, how did you do that? And maybe you share an insight that you deliver value in your area. Could you please?
Well, I think everybody knows that Singapore is probably hitting, twice as fast as other part of the world. We are next to the equator, so every day is summer for us, and we have really, the urban heat island effect make it even hotter. And sometimes you feel like, wow, I don't want to go out, of the house at all. So how do we, keep the living and the workspace cool right from day one is our priority. And for our green building and sustainability, there are 3 deliverables that we set for ourselves. The number 1 is decarbonization, which we talk about it. And then the second one is digitalization and innovation. Because without technology, without solutions, without AI, you can't really move the needle and talk about, low carbon and all. And then the last but not least, the third D is disclosure and communication. So if we look at some of the, Singapore Green Plan, we talk about city in nature, we talk about sustainable living. We also have the 80-80-80 goals, that is to green 80% of all buildings in Singapore by 2030, and we are only about 45% now. And we are also not just looking at green building, we are looking at super low energy building by 2030 for all new developments. So in order to cool the environment, how do we do it next to the equator? So from the day we get hold of a site, we already look at the design with architects and all, and how do you orientate the buildings, make a lot of difference in terms of like maximizing natural resources, cross ventilation, and using AI and digital solutions can help us simulate it. And there's a couple of our new development, we have done something similar at Boulevard, the project. We actually managed to reduce heat gain by 20%, right from the drawing board, the technology. And for those who are familiar with South Beach, you probably will remember that there is a microclimatic, the canopy, the wavy one, and you stand under it. It doesn't have any fan or air condition, but you feel really cool. That is actually the microclimatic design to capture ventilation. So there are actually a lot of solutions, not just about technology, but also about how do you design it and maximize, wind flows and ventilation. That can be from day one, you can work on it. And of course, how do you manage property? So we actually come up with a lot of technologies that you can put sensors. We have the, over the last 2 years, we actually managed to come up with this digital platform, which is predictive management and maintenance, thousands of sensors in the common areas to identify, where are the needs of, resources. When there's no, users there, you don't really need the light or the aircon and all that. So there are actually many ways to, to design and to, manage buildings. Just a fun fact, just now I talked about the 40% of carbon emission by built environment, actually out of which 28% actually caused by the management and operations of buildings. So how do you manage existing building is can really move the needle. Yeah.
Thank you. So it's always possible, right? As long as the stakeholders find value in it. So we have last 2 minutes. I will ask Kelvin to go to the last part, which is C, commitment. What kind of commitment would you expect the people seeking green finance? Maybe in 1 minute.
That's a tough one. Yeah, I think in terms of commitment, first of all, when we or any other financial institutions actually arrange for any green loans, green bonds or whatever, we have to stick to principles. There are certain guidelines that we absolutely need to have, right? Because there's this thing, I'm sure you heard of greenwashing. I think from a financial institution point of view, we cannot be seen greenwashing projects, right? So we will stick to principles, like guidelines like the green bond principles or the sustainability linked principles, where there's actually been developed by the loan market associations. And so that provides a guideline for use of proceeds, basically how these are reported and how it's being tracked. I think that's important too, right? The other one, of course, is certifications. There are lots of certification we could use, whether it's BCA Green Mark or international, like the Global Sustainability Index, Real Estate Sustainability Index and all that. That's the other one. The third one, I think, when we deal with, we work with customers, our customers and all that, is that in Singapore, for example, there's a sustainability report, which I think CDL is one of the forefronts to issue that, right? And this year, there will be standards like the TCFD standard that all listed entities have to basically report in and disclosed. But more importantly, apart from standards, guidelines, certifications and all that, from a financial institution point of view, I think we want to understand our customers, their sustainability strategy and governance, right? And to look at how fiscal risks and transition risks are impacting them, because that's important. And also to work with them to see opportunities on how we can work with them in terms of maximizing the sustainable goals. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I have 10 seconds left. I will conclude this panel discussion, and I certainly hope it will not be the end of the discussion, because we want to make sure that we have a sustainable future. And if you have any question, if you are interested to engage with any of us, please reach out to the organizer. I take this time now to thank Professor Jason Pomeroy, Esther Ang, and Kelvin Tan for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.